Well, good evening and welcome to part the second of Oz and Charlie's gallop around England following English wine. So it's English Wine Week. So what better thing to do than to actually have this gallop to visit 9 vineyards which have been chosen for us by Kieran Atkinson of the English Wine Project. And yesterday we had enormous fun talking about Relishaw Hall in Derbyshire. Then we went up to Laneborough up in Gateshead. And then we gently meandered down the South Downs to Brighton to the Bacchus Estate. So we're going to have a lot more fun tonight. So also you can tune into last night's episode if you missed it. So I'm joined by a great mate of mine who's been rattling on to me about English wine for 30 years. And the penny is finally dropping. Broadcaster, West End actor, and well-known wine writer. He's got the most unbelievable palate, this guy. He can remember wines he tasted 30 years ago with such clarity. Now, Oz Clarke, welcome. Now, what's this book all about, mate?
What? This book?
Oh. Oz Clarke's Book of English Wine. That's 2 copies sold.
My mum and you. Funny, talking about the first thing you can ever remember. I remember the first English wine I tasted. I remember the flavour to this day. It was a Huxelraber from Benenden. From Bidden. Sorry, Benenden. I said Benenden because I've drank it because I was very keen on a girl who lived in Biddenden called Rosie. I was also actually keen on a girl called Nikki. Actually, I was probably slightly keener on Nikki, but it was Rosie this time. And for some, you don't want to know about this time.
I don't want to know about your love life. I want you to open the first bottle of wine.
Amazing sort of elderflower and grapefruit kind of flavour of that very first wine.
Well, let's open the first one.
Let's do it. I tell you what, though, the reason I wrote this book was I just thought the time had come, Charlie.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by English wine. I'm a country boy. I grew up in the fields of Kent, and right in the old days, I've always, ever since I started getting interested in wine, been determined to support the underdog and to encourage newcomers. And so I went on doing that in the early days with people in Kent and Sussex and Hampshire. Hey, that looks nice. Better get my glass open. Okay, here we go.
Right. Well, the first wine we're going to try is from the Flint Estate from Norfolk. Now, this is made by the Charmat method. It's obviously a sparkling wine. Just talk a bit about the Charmat method, Oz.
Well, I'm just fantastic. It's supposed to be a sort of a second-rate kind of way of making wines bubble. I'm perfectly happy with the bubble of this. But the thing about the Charmat method is that it's regarded as inferior because it's cheaper and it doesn't take nearly so long to do. We've got 3 ways of making sparkling wine, basically. There's the old, great traditional method, which is called the champagne method, the classic method, whatever. And that is what they use in Champagne, what they use in nearly all the wineries in England. And it means that you make the wine ferment a second time inside the actual bottle, this actual bottle. And that slowly creates a wonderful array of bubbles in the wine. But it often takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years to really let it happen. And it creates that biscuity, that creamy flavor. Yeah. Now, the second way is a tank method. It's called Charmat. I think Mr. Charmat probably invented it. And this means you make the wine ferment for a second time inside the tank. So in the tank, you have to throw in some sugar and throw in some yeast. It all ferments again under pressure. And then you bottle this stuff off. Now, what you don't get there is that creaminess, that sort of croissant, flaky croissant, kind of lovely, nutty, soft brownie flavors. But what you do get instead is much more aroma. So for grapes like Bacchus and Solaris and other grapes which are widely grown across England, this cheaper method, which you can release the wine at 1 year old. You can release the wine at 9 months
Which,
old.
Of course, makes complete economic sense as well, doesn't it?
Fantastic sense. There's going to be a lot of people who are dead keen to keep their cash flow going in the next 2 or 3 years with enormous crops of English grapes coming onto the market, which haven't yet found a market. Now, one of the ways this market can work is that if you can make a sparkling wine much cheaper in a tank and release it within a year, for a decent price, you can actually keep your cash flow going. And also, things like Bacchus and Solaris, those kind of grapes are really good because they're aromatic. Things
And
like
cuts out a
Chardonnay.
lot of the snobbery as well, doesn't it? I mean, I think English wine, where I'm sort of coming from, the English wine is continually experimenting. There are no sort of set rules laid down like there are in Chablis or Champagne region. So all these young people making these wines are having fun.
Charlie and Oz, what do you think about do you think it's a good thing for the English wine industry to be producing Charmat method as well as traditional method? Do you think it's
absolutely?
You think it's a risk?
This is great. This is a great.
But do you think it's a risk as we establish ourselves as an international wine producing country?
I do think it's a risk, Kieran, and I think it's a risk we have to take. I think that we should be very clear that in the global world of wine, where England is really making a bit of a mark, it's beginning to make a mark in America, it's beginning to make a mark in China, it's beginning to make a mark in other parts of Europe. There, it is the traditional method, old-fashioned traditional method sparkling wine, which is making us famous, because we say quite happily this is as good as good champagne, and perhaps it's even better. So we need to protect that in some way, so that people can't pretend this Charmat style is actually the more expensive style.
So what's it like? What do you think of the wine, Soz?
I think it's lovely.
Fruity. It's fruity in a way that if you've spent 3 or 4 years lying on its yeast in a bottle, slowly getting its bubbles together, you'd have lost all that fruit. Because the thing about the Charmat thing, in this great big tank, and it's young wine, and it's made from things like Rondo and Reichensteiner and Bacchus and Solaris and all these grapes. None of those grapes are very good for making long-term sparkling wine, but they're aromatic, they're fruity, they're bright. This is absolutely bursting with a sort of rose hip and strawberry and pink lady apple kind of fruit, and it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I think it's a sort of wine that once you sort of walked off the beach and you're having a barbecue on the beach, this is the sort of wine you want to step straight into. It's refreshing. It also, it's for everybody's taste, isn't it? Because it's not too dry, it's not too sweet. I think it's a very good all-rounder.
It's really fruity, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The fruit is fantastically good. I think that Flint have got tremendous quality fruit anyway. That sort of Norfolk fruit is absolutely bursting with character, and it really shows in this wine. And I'm sure that they would say, if we tried to make it, I mean, they are making traditional method stuff as well, but as they say, they don't expect to release it until it's 5 or 6 years old. Right. I wouldn't want my cash flow to rely on 6.
No, well, absolutely right. Accountants rule in the end, don't they? But let's move on. We're going to do the 3 sparkling wines in a row tonight. So we're moving a bit further.
No, Charlie.
Charlie, I think we're doing.
No, let's do both the Flint wines.
We're going to stick with the Flint. Right. Perfect.
Yeah. So 2 from Flint. So Norfolk grapes. And then we're going down to Galleywood and Essex before heading up to Hencote. So let's stick with Flint.
Yeah.
Right. Okay then. Well,
so that we can see in each winery what they do with sparkling and then what they do with still, because this should be really interesting with Flint, because Flint have made a big mark with their Bacchus as well as with their sparkling wine. So let's see what we think about it.
So Bacchus, this is sort of our equivalent to New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, isn't it? In terms of style.
Well, in terms of, I tell you what, it's not that it tastes the same, but it does the same job.
Yeah.
That's what's important about it. I'm really glad it doesn't taste the same. I'd hate it to taste the same. I'm a great fan of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
I'm one of the world's biggest fans of it. But I don't want us to make that. I want us to make it English. And Bacchus, it does have a lovely elderflower lift. It's got a lovely greenness. And I hope that the winemakers in England don't try too hard to make it too serious, because it's such a beautiful lifted style of wine. It is so refreshing, so mouth-watering, so pour it down your throat. The French have got a word called gouléant, which means the wine just flows down your throat.
Well, in England, we're innovators, not imitators.
Yeah. And we don't need to imitate. Nobody's ever made a decent Bacchus in the whole history of the world. Bacchus is one of those grapes that comes from Germany, and it was invented. It's an invented grape, and it's invented to actually produce enormous amounts of sugar very quickly in the German vineyards. The German vineyards are warmer than our vineyards. The Bacchus from Germany mostly tastes absolute rubbish, but Bacchus here, where it's colder, where the Bacchus can creep to ripeness, and particularly the Bacchus here we're talking about, which is up on the Norfolk-Suffolk border, just on the Waveney River Valley there. It's cooler up there. Excellent soils. What happens in East Anglia is that the south of East Anglia has got really fantastic weather conditions, but funny old soils. And as you go further north through Suffolk, then up to Norfolk, you begin to get more of a North Sea effect on the weather, but the soils get better and better and better. And this is the bottom end of Norfolk here. And I must admit, I think the quality of the fruit is absolutely delicious.
Yeah, that's a lovely, lovely glass of wine.
I think one of the exciting things about Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex is how dry it is as well.
Yeah.
So it's beautifully dry and has almost continental growing conditions. It's really I mean, if you had to kind of choose somewhere to put your kind of flag in the ground and say, perhaps this is the place, perhaps this is the wine region, then East Anglia could be it.
Well, isn't it interesting that Professor Nesbitt, who is this great academic who's done this enormous study of England's potential vineyards, he's identified 35,000 hectares of land, which he says is prime vineyard land. Hardly any of it's been planted yet, and an enormous amount of it is in the east of England, particularly Essex, Suffolk, up to Norfolk.
So some great opportunities, but I've always understood, Oz, that wine is grown on south-facing, or the best wines come on south-facing slopes. Now, my rudimentary knowledge of Norfolk and Suffolk is there aren't any slopes. So what's the lie of the land from Flint?
Well, of course, there are slopes because this is the Waveney Valley, and even though it's perilously low, it's still got some sort of slopes. But you're absolutely right. And north-facing slopes do happen in Essex. Newhall has north-facing slopes and has been making tremendous wine for 30 years. Renishaw, which we had yesterday, that's slightly north-facing, because Breaky Bottom in Sussex, his early ripening vineyard is north-facing. White Castle in Wales has planted Cabernet Franc on a slightly north-facing slope, because when you think about it, if it's slightly north-facing, you still get all the sun, because the sun in the summer doesn't set in the southwest, it sets in the west-northwest. And you get it, so long as you have got dips in the hills and things, and you haven't got a forest in your way, it's slightly north-facing may actually be better than south or southeast in some cases.
Yeah, great mate of mine is the president of the Burnham Market Mountain Rescue Team.
Is that when you go on the train from Norwich?
He doesn't have a lot of work to do.
Which I think is about the least used station in the whole of England. Shippy Hill, and you look around.
Wasn't Charlie? We've got a question.
Would actually make a mountain there.
Right. Yeah.
We've got a question from Charlotte from Devon. It's about regionality and styles. And is it possible yet to distinguish between the styles across regions, or should we be looking at England as a region in itself?
I think the point is that I don't think we should get too fussed about regions at the moment. And if we started getting politically fussed about saying, a Sussex wine or a Kent wine or a Hampshire wine, I think we could get ourselves into trouble. But there's absolutely no question in my mind that Kent wines taste different to Sussex wines, and Sussex wines taste different to Hampshire wines. The thing about it is, of course, many of the best vineyards and best wineries blend. I mean, someone like Nightimber, they blend from Kent, Sussex, and Hampshire. The Essex, the grapes are so good in Essex that they sell their grapes all the way across the south of England.
Sure. So, Oz, what did we think of that one?
I thought it was absolutely
from
delicious.
Flint.
It had a certain amount of seriousness about it, but thank goodness not too much. Lovely acidity from the cooler conditions up in Norfolk. Really bright, really direct. And if you want to say it's our answer to New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, well, yes, it is, but it's our answer.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we're going to just gallop or meander slightly down the road now to the county of Essex.
Yep.
Okay. And our next wine we're going to try is the Galleywood Single Estate Classic Brut. Now, you know Oz as a cricketing man that Essex surely gets as little rain as anywhere because, you know, Alistair Cook and these guys, they just accumulate runs for fun, don't they? So,
yep.
Down here in Essex, what do we got?
It's actually a great intro to Galleywood's wines because Ian at Galleywood Vineyard actually used to sell a lot of his fruit because his fruit was of such a high quality. But because it was so good, he kind of thought, well, actually, I need to start making wine myself because my fruit is perfect. So I'd be really interested to kind of see what you guys think.
And of course, he's a great expert because he's been running a vineyard planting business for 20 years. So he absolutely, when he decides to plant Galleywood, he's not someone thinking, oh, I've got a few acres of land, I wonder what it'll do. He knows it's going to be good. Now, the thing about Galleywood is that it's just off the A12 in Chelmsford. About a mile or so to the east, you've got a really sorted operation called Danbury, and another mile or two, you're way into this world which is called the Crouch Valley. That's the Blackwater River to the north, the Crouch River to the south, and people. It's called, what is it? It's a particular postcode, CM3, which is Chelmsford. They say that CM3, the postcode, is the most densely populated vineyard postcode in England. And everyone thinks, Essex, never heard of it. Well, it's, as Kieran was saying, it's the dryness. Yeah. The whole of the southeast of England is dry, but Essex is even drier. It doesn't mean it's warmer. Other places get higher temperatures, but you can have the lowest rainfall in the whole of England in Essex. I've stood on the vineyards in just about a mile away from Galleywood, and I've seen the rain coming up the Blackwater and it's sheeting down onto the Blackwater River. And yet, as soon as you get onto where I'm standing, the sun's shining, and you move a half a mile first that way, and there's the Crouch River, and you see the rain sheeting down onto the Crouch River. Yet as soon as you get back onto dry land within half a mile, sun is shining. It is a really genuinely special microclimate, local climate.
So going back to your original point about talking about the different Charmat and Method Champenoise, here we have a wine that's from 2015 vintage. So this is one that's bottle aged. You know, it's really beginning to show those sort of champagne-y, biscuity qualities.
And you can really see the difference, can't you? It's doing a completely different job. In fact, I would say this one, I would age it for another 5 years probably. It's nowhere near its peak yet, but it's just beginning to show that slightly bread crusty.
Yeah, absolutely.
People talk about brioche, but I don't really. I think brioche is a slightly old-fashioned kind of term because it's bloody difficult.
Yeah, well, we don't usually use French terms. You know, what's an English brioche? Let's use English terms to talk about these wonderful English wines.
I tell you what, I have a sausage roll here. This is from a company called Little Jack Horner, who make fantastic homemade sausage rolls. The smell of that fresh, I had this in the oven about 20 minutes ago. So the smell of that crisp, slightly browned pastry, that's the kind of smell you get.
Perfect.
And it's an English smell.
Do you think the sparkling wine that you've got from Galleywood complements that kind of rich pastry? Is that what you're saying?
I think that it's halfway there. I think it's going to get a lot more of that pastry, but also interesting. Going back to the sausage roll. I mean, sorry to go on about sausage rolls, but one of the things about English Wine Week is we should take it not just about wine. We should take it about eating and drinking, so that we should all drink English wine all this week, but we should also eat English food.
Absolutely right.
Everywhere. Charlie started to munch as well. So
I've got a little sausage of pork and Bramley apple, which is actually what I'm having for.
Well, mine's pork and sage, and I've got another one here. By the way, God, sorry, this is a wine program. Look at that there. That's the most important thing. Made in England.
Yeah, we've really got to
This is a
make an effort now to
pastrami.
promote, haven't we?
It's a pastrami.
So
made by-
okay, well, Oz, just on that on the Galleywood Sparkling, do we give that thumbs up? We do, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
I
Okay.
think it's a much more serious wine than the other, and therefore, if you're just in a boisterous party mood, I would drink the Flint. If you're actually in a more contemplative mood, a more philosophical mood, as I'm sure you normally are, Charlie.
Yes, absolutely.
I would drink the Galleywood. I think it's really nicely done because this is another new operation. Kieran, you tell us a bit more, but you know about this. Did you actually make this wine, Kieran?
I didn't make this wine, but I did have a hand in the making of the Bacchus.
They have a very special way of their winery is a very particular winery, isn't it? Can you tell us?
I don't think Ian would mind me saying that his operation is ingenious. So he's got a cockard press, and for anyone that knows about winemaking, a cockard press is the best wine press in the world, arguably. Is what's used in Champagne. He's got it 2 meters above the ground. It's pressed. It's then everything is done by gravity. So the juice is then moved by gravity, goes into a separate tank. From that separate tank, it's all on winches. So I don't know if you can see the small design on the sparkling wine bottles, on the still wine bottles, but you've got a little hook, and that hook replicates the winches. And so every time you move a wine, which as a winemaker is quite an interesting way of making wine, but every time you move the wine, you do so with these winches, which means it's a very soft approach. It means that every time it's the most soft way possible that you can make wine. So you're doing, because winemaking ultimately is about taking the perfect thing, the grape, fermenting it in the best possible way one can, and then ultimately performing all the operations without any sort of disruption to the life of that fruit, to that grape. And so, to my mind, it's an ingenious operation. It's an ingenious way of making wine. And I think hats off to Ian and Galleywood for the vision to do that, because Ian wasn't a winemaker, but almost put his engineering head on and went, how do I do this the best way I possibly can? And I think that's pretty special.
Gentleness.
Absolutely.
Especially in our northern climate, we're trying to make wines which are aromatic, which are delicate, which are refreshing and invigorating. Presumably, if you crush everything and whack it around, you can bruise the fruit, but you can also bruise the wine, can't you?
Absolutely. I think it's just thinking of the grape. Well, the grape is alive. The grape is a living thing, and you bring it into the winery, it's still breathing. It's come off the vine, and then from there you ferment it in the most delicate way possible. You move it in the most delicate way possible. You handle it in the most delicate way possible, and ultimately you're trying to extract from it its character, its flavor, its nuance. And the way Ian has set his winery up is exciting as a winemaker. It also poses difficulties, because ultimately you can go, well, I'd rather just turn a pump on and bosh it from one point A to point B. But to do so in such a delicate way ultimately means, as a winemaker, you can say, I've done my best. Yeah. And that's really what it's about as a maker. And hats off to the Galleywood operation.
Yeah, good. Well, again, it's a completely different style of Bacchus too.
Yes, it is completely.
It's not so aromatic. It's not so zingy.
You're not getting that elderflower hit.
No, you're not
at all. It's
Kieran, would that be something to do with different yeasts being used?
Yeah,
absolutely. So, I mean, I work in the yeast world. I won't say who for, because that would be a bit naughty. But it's all, so much of what you extract from grapes is about yeast. So one can use a different yeast if you're trying to get more fruit. One can use different yeast if you're trying to get more minerality or those kind of stone fruit flavors, or if you're just trying to go for typicity of the fruit. So it's all about your vision of production, and it's that vision of where you want the consumer. So you're talking about, coming off the beach, what wine do you want to go for? And as you said before, this isn't that wine. But if you're wanting a serious wine that is something you're going to taste and think about and really, really enjoy, then this is the sort of thing in which I try and do as a maker. So it's choosing between hundreds of different yeasts. It's a vast subject, but you've really got to think about what you're doing the whole way through.
But what I'm really loving is this is the third Bacchus we've tried. There's the second one today. We had the other one yesterday, and they're all so different.
Really different.
I mean, it's brilliant, and yet we're here just on our little sceptred Isle of England.
Oh, yeah.
So to have a sort of lumped together as English wine, I think would be very unfair. There's a great difference, you know. We all know, don't we? Because we live in England, how different the weather is in Cornwall from it is in Shropshire, Derbyshire, and Yorkshire. And these winemakers are really reflecting that, and I'm loving this whole thing about this is the third Bacchus, same grape, different interpretation, different taste.
That's why we're on our canter, Charlie. That's why.
Correct.
We're going from the very far north to the very south.
Absolutely right.
I think this is again. Let's move on to our next one.
Right. Okay.
Now we're heading west, aren't we?
We are heading west. We're heading west to Shrewsbury, or Shrewsbury, whichever way you wish to.
I'm a Shrewsbury guy.
Whilst you're opening your wine bottles, a quick question from Joan from Staffordshire. How important is a good winemaker to wine, or is it all down to the quality of the grapes?
A good winemaker is fantastically important.
Yes, terribly important.
Otherwise, Kieran, who's strong and very good at martial arts, would be right round to my place. I think there is at the moment a slight mood, a slight zeitgeist of saying, "Oh, just let the grapes do it, and let it. The grapes can sort it out by itself." The grapes can't sort it out by itself, and the juice can't sort it out by itself. Basically, grape juice will become vinegar if you let it. You have to have human intervention. You have to have skill. But I think the great thing about a great winemaker is they also have a vision of flavor. And we can all learn how to do it. And then there are some of us who can go to an extra level and have a vision of flavor. Now, but
Oz, isn't that why? Well, you've got New Zealanders making wine in France, Frenchmen making wine in Chile and Argentina. You know, they're the hired guns that are sort of sent in there to do the blending and give advice and so on and so forth. And so that's the sort of the international part of the whole wine business, isn't it? That different winemakers go all over the world making different wines in not their own countries. But Charlie, I suspect, Kieran, that most of the people who are making wine in England are English, are they?
Well, I think that's really the beauty of this tasting and the wines you're tasting. Most of the people involved with this have been at Plumpton College, which is the only recognised wine school in England. So I'd recommend everyone to go to Plumpton College if you'd like to be a winemaker. But also at the same time, it's the only recognised wine school in Europe, which is taught in English. So most of the makers which have appeared last night and tonight and will appear next week have spent time at Plumpton College, and so it is a centre of excellence, and it's a place I'd recommend for anyone who loves wine that get involved with, have a look at, do a short course even, but at the same time try their wine. It's actually really, really, really nice.
So we're now in Shropshire at the Hencote Vineyard. So this wine is, well, it's Cerval, 65% Sauvignon Blanc, 35% Pinot Noir. So, you know, it's got one of the great sort of champagne grapes in there. And this, I think, well, it's not quite sort of the champagne method, but it's traditional.
Well, Charlie, I think the point about this is it's another example, just like with one of the wines that Kieran made yesterday. That's
lovely.
As long as you, if you don't like Sauvignon Blanc very much, put something like Pinot Noir with it, and it creates a really tremendous partnership. Because I can taste that slightly lifted acidity of Sauvignon Blanc. I can taste that very slightly. I mean, it's an apple peely, lemon zesty, but it's also, funnily enough, I say this with great fondness for Sauvignon Blanc. There's something slightly muddy and dusty and dirty about the end flavor of Sauvignon Blanc, but I don't think that matters, particularly when you blend it with something like Pinot Noir, and particularly when you make sparkling wine, and therefore you've got all that yeast character. Because when you make a sparkling wine, the wine might be in contact with the yeast for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and the yeast is decomposing all the time and turning into this wonderful bread crusty, creamy, nutty flavored sort of stuff, which flavors the wine. Now, I must say, I tasted this wine, not been quite sure because I don't know this wine, not been quite sure what to get, and I'm absolutely delighted because it's Ronseal. It's exactly what it says on the tin. I can taste the Sauvignon, but I can taste the way the Pinot Noir has wrapped it round. And this is, I think this Hencote is a really interesting idea because Shropshire, well, you think, hang on, isn't it a bit wet over there? Well, mostly it is a bit wet from sort of Liverpool down to Bristol. Yes, it is. But there are patches which aren't, because if you look at the Cambrian mountains, the Welsh mountains, it's a rain shadow. And basically there are bits there's a bit in Denbigh, there's a bit in Montgomery, there are bits in Shropshire, there are Worcestershire. The Vale of Evesham is one of the most famous places to grow things in the whole of England. Monmouthshire, you can produce beautiful wines in Monmouth because there are enough patches where it doesn't rain and you get more sun. Now, Roxeter, which is just 2 or 3 miles south of here at Shrewsbury, the Romans had a vineyard there 2,000 years ago, and Roxeter famously is supposed to have 15% more sunshine and about 20% less rain than people only a few miles away. Now, Hencote may also be benefiting from that. So
we definitely give this one a hit, don't we? I think this is
areas in the west of England. I think that these rain shadows and these local climates are tremendously important, and the Welsh find that as well. I think this is.
I know time is getting on, but I'm really interested to get your view on Sauvignon Blanc versus, if you can do a versus, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, because we're seeing a great expansion of English wine at the moment. It's a truly exciting time to be in English wine.
Yeah.
But I just wonder whether or not we're missing a trick with Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, nobody's planting Sauvignon Blanc.
No.
I mean, basically, if you say what's everyone planting, they're planting Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Bacchus. They're all putting their eggs in those 4 baskets. We've got quite a lot of Sauvignon Blanc. I don't necessarily think that we have to go and find more, because the thing about Sauvignon Blanc is it's always been able to give a decent crop, quite a big crop often, and it's pretty much disease resistant to the kind of diseases that dampness and wetness bring into the country. And consequently, it's a really important grape in a maritime climate like ours. But as climate changes, hey, I'm not saying we're going to get drier, because we're going to have more storms. We're going to have more rain in more concentrated forms than we've actually ever had in the past.
So it's going to end up being a bit like Colombard, isn't it? That's sort of the filler, the French filler grape.
But you see, Colombard's a fantastic grape. But
absolutely, I agree. Yeah,
it's a delicious grape. But I think that I wouldn't really push the boat out saying we've got to have more Sauvignon Blanc. I don't think we do. But I would say to those people, there are wine geeks and wine buffs and wine snobs, to be honest, who say, oh God, I can smell the Sauvignon Blanc. And I'm saying, I'm delighted you can. If you don't like it, don't bloody buy it. Go and buy what your Chardonnay and your Pinot.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff.
Sauvignon Blanc has got a place in our market. Anyway, here we've got another of these.
We've got another one of these. So this is the Hencote Mark I, which was released straight after the harvest of 2018. Again, we've got 72% Pinot Noir here, Oz, and then the Pinot Noir Precoci and a bit of Rondo.
Precoci. I love the way you say Precoci. Where did you go to school, Charlie? In Rome, was it, or Florence? Precoce, you great.
Oxford.
Wait, it's precoce. Precoce means early. Oh, dear it. Where did you find him, Kieran? I think that the 72 Pinot Noir is great, But the really important point here is the Pinot Noir Precoce, which is, I can't remember what it's called, Frauburgunder or something from Germany. It's basically sort of Pinot Noir, but it's got a bit more color, which is important in England, where you often don't get enough color, and it ripens earlier, I think, and it's got a slightly earthier taste. So in other words, it's not so beautiful as Pinot Noir, but it's the Seyval Blanc thing.
Yeah.
Blend it with something else, and it works really well. Now, hey, we've got 8% Rondo here. Rondo is but if you over ripen it, if you bash it about and you shove it in an oak barrel and press the life out of it, it makes a wine which is undrinkable. But if you treat it gently, it's a wine which has got a reasonable amount of color. It's got tons of color if you let it. It's a sort of Tanturia. It's got, I think it's got Kieran. It's got red juice, isn't it?
No, it hasn't. But Rondo, if treated correctly, can produce wonderful wine. But as you say, if you bash it to smithereens, it produces something which isn't particularly nice. But it's all about, again, it's all about looking after the fruit.
Yeah.
As a winemaker, it's all about looking after the fruit and doing the best you can with the fruit every single time.
And Rondo will give you a decent coloured wine in Derbyshire.
It's ultimately, I'm sure these guys of Hencote have used it as a blending tool. But it doesn't always have to be. It's all about the year itself. So Rondo treated nicely can be fantastic. But
I think in the last
couple of great color.
I think the last couple of years we've seen, particularly probably since about 17, 18, we've seen a lot of people saying, let's stop trying to make a deep, dark red out of Rondo. Let's make something gentler and milder. And it's showing, along with its friend Regent. These are Regent, I believe it's called, but we call it Regent because that's how we pronounce it.
Again, going back to these beautiful rosés, it makes a very nice rosé, very nice red currant, very nice black currant, curranty flavor rosé. I mean, that's perfect for what it's for.
So true. Rondo makes lovely rosé, and I really hope that in the next year or two we're going to find people all over England saying, I'm not going to drink foreign rosé anymore because we make such wonderful rosé in this country.
Yeah,
we're going to drink English rosé
and English Pinot Noir, because I think that's a great glass of wine.
It's a great glass of wine, but if it was just Pinot Noir, it wouldn't be so good.
Absolutely, I think that the winemaker's been very clever here, just adding a few different blends and so on.
You've got Rondo.
So well, that is actually our sixth and final wine for this evening. So I think this is our second show. We've got another one next Saturday where we're going to romp around again and gallop through some wines, Oz. So Kieran, thank you very much for your insights of winemaking. Oz, as ever, fantastic. And let's all be safe and remain forever thirsty. Cheers, lads.
Forever thirsty. See you, fellas.
Cheers.